Okay, so now let's do a quick review of some commands, and I would encourage you to go experiment with these. And you won't have seen all of them, and it's not quite imperative that you remember all these that are here, but you should at least know how to interact with users. So the first one is the passwd command. That allows us to change the password of a user. So if I do sudo password Sally, it'll say enter the new password for Sally. Okay, I will do that. And I can, as sudo user, I can change the password for anyone. Change shell. I'm not going to do some of these. These aren't all that critical. Change shell allows us to change the shell for a particular user. The ID command will give us information about our currently logged in user. And you can see the groups that we are currently members of. So that might be useful. The who command is similar to that. Well, the who command tells us who is logged in right now. W is kind of an alternate version of who that gives similar information to that as well. Change finger will allow us to change that geckos information. Let me skip UMask for just a second and I'll focus more on that in just a minute. Groups allows us to see what groups we are a member of. And finger, we have to install that, I think. So we won't worry about that, but you could install it. You could play with it. It just allows us to see the geckos information of a particular user again. So we've already looked at the add user command, so I'm not going to do that. Add group, I've just done that one. That adds a new group. Group would allow us to change the group of a particular user. So let's say, and I don't usually use this one too often either, but change group, I don't know, Sally to, what groups do I have? I already forgot. To the movies group. Okay. Sudo to group Sally to movies. Cannot access movies. Okay, well, I never do this, so. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. That's not how you do it. It changes the group ownership of a file. So, and I never use that command, so we're not going to worry about that one. But chmod and chown, we are going to spend some time on that. But before we do that, let's review what the permissions bits mean again. So ls minus l, home, where was I? Had Sally had some, or I think it was Fred. I had some files there. In any case, let's just do this. So I'm going to touch a new file, file1.txt, and touch another new file, file2.txt. I don't care if I misspelled it. So here I have two files. By default, these are the permissions. So let's review real quick. These first three, and I'm skipping that first one for just a minute. You can see that we can have a special character there that means D for directory if it's a directory. We can have some other characters there that we might come across, and I'll point that out later. But these three bits represent, or characters, I guess, represent the user, what the user is allowed to do. So the user can read, write. These three represent what the group can do. The group can read and write. And this last three represent what everyone else can do on the system. So that everyone else can just read that. Now, if you look down at the directory itself, users can read, write, and they can execute, meaning they can actually change into that directory or CD into that directory. Groups, same thing, and everyone else, they can read and they can execute, meaning they can CD into that directory, but they won't be able to modify the contents once they're in there. So there's our permissions, and many times it's easier to refer to those permissions in an octal notation versus saying, versus the symbolic mode of RWX. Remember that R represents a 4, right, or W represents a 2, X represents a 1. So if we were to come back here, this we could say is permission 6, that's permission 6, and that's permission 4. How do we get that? Because we already said R is a 4, W is a 2, we add them up, we got 6. So 664 is that permission, 664 is that permission, and this permission is 775 because read is a 4, X is a 1. So that, let's look at a couple more examples before I move on from that, just so you can make sure you have it. So let's do ls minus l. So I'm going to do chmod. Let's review the chmod command. Chmod command says let's change the mode of a file or the permissions. That's what it's referring to. So we're going to say chmod, and I'm going to do 555 file1.txt and you do ls minus l. Well, what does 555 do? It's kind of a stupid permission, but I'm just doing it for fun. So that says I'm going to give them 4 plus 1 is 5, so they're going to have read, they're going to have execute. Everyone's going to have read, everyone's going to have execute. Let's do chmod. How about 437 on file 1? What did that do before I see if you can identify what that did before you continue on in the slide? So 437 on file 1, 4 says give the users read, 3 says let's just write and execute. That's still a weird permission, but that's what it is, write and execute. And then 7 says read, write, and execute. So I would encourage you to spend some time with those if you don't remember how to use the chmod command. The other thing we can do with chmod is we can refer to it in symbolic notation. So I can say u equals rw, g equals r, and o equals r on file 1.txt. So we could also do that, and notice that's what I got. So the user has read write, the group has read, and others have read. You could also do something like chmod u plus, or let's do o plus w on file 1.txt. That says just give. So this says set the group exactly to read. Remove everything else. This one, when the plus just says take whatever the current permissions are and add the write bit to it. So now others have the write bit set. So play around with chmod. Make sure you understand both symbolic and octal notation.